Hey everyone, how's it going? This is Glenn of searchworks.ph, and today I wanted to do a video explaining the March 2024 Google Core algorithm update. I know some of you are aware that I haven't been exactly active in blogging and vlogging for a while now. I've been focusing on management mostly in my agency, but I felt that the end of the rollout of the Google Core update for March 2024 was a big enough deal to kind of break out of my hiatus temporarily and talk about it, because I know a lot of you are confused as to what this is about, what you need to do about it, and what it means for us SEOs moving forward. So yeah, let's talk about this, and I'll give you some advice on what potentially you could do about it if you were negatively impacted, and if you were positively impacted, meaning you gain rankings and traffic out of this update. I'll shed some light also on what probably it cost it, and what you can continue to improve on moving forward. So a little bit of introduction. A lot of you know me. My name is Glenn. I run an agency called searchworks.ph. We do mostly SEO and paid search. My background is in computer science, although I've been more of an SEO guy for the past, since 2008. So you do the math on that one. Not exactly young in the industry. I'm also a data scientist by profession. I finished my postgrad at UT Austin in data science last year, and I've been dabbling more into data analytics and machine learning as of late, thus, dividing my time between SEO and data science. But yeah, basically, that's it as far as I'm concerned. My agency, as some of you may know, formerly GDI, rebranded to searchworks.ph. We are based here in the Philippines, San Fernando, Pampanga. We've been doing business for about 11 years now. Not a huge agency. I would certainly describe us as boutique, about 35 employees at any given time. As I mentioned, mostly we do SEO, PPC, and web development and design. All right. Now that that's out of the way, let's talk about the March 2024 Google Core update. So the first thing you need to understand in order to deal with it would be to really get a grasp of what this update is. And basically, it's an update that took a long while to fully roll out. Like, when Google introduces a new update, it doesn't affect its entirety of the way it works or it serves globally at the drop of a hat. Basically, what happens is Google deploys the update, and it takes a while for that update to fully integrate into its system and to fully affect the search results. So this is one of the longer ones. Typically, updates take about a week, maybe a couple of weeks to fully roll out. This took more than a month. Basically, it started on March 5th. A lot of people and the SEO experts monitoring search results volatility, like the SEMrushes of the world, the Kissmetrics of the world, they started noticing fluctuations in the search results from March 5th. And then it went on and on and on until Google finally told the world that basically, as of April 19th, the rollout has been completed. So what happened in this update? Basically, it integrated the helpful content update, which was observed in the fourth quarter of last year. I believe it was November when it was observed to be really pronounced and to have a significant impact on the search results. But multiple sources that I've been reading said that it started earlier than that, but the most, noticeable phases of that rollout was observed in November. So basically, the core, the helpful content update which we will now call the HCU, not to be confused with the MCU, that was outside of the core workings of Google, meaning Google has this, main ranking criteria such as your page rank, your content quality, and whatnot. But along the lines of that system, like you have your core ranking model, there are supplementary ranking balancers, if you may, around it that would refine the SERPs further for Google. So it's not just one big system doing all the work of ranking, indexing, caching, all that good stuff in the search engines. Specifically with rankings, it's not just the core model that's at work. There's a lot of little filters and tweaks and little subsystems out there that help balance the SERPs as a whole. So the HCU used to be outside of that core model, but this time Google mentioned that the HCU is now part of the core model, which probably explains why the March 2024 update, in my mind, has been the most impactful for the last 10 years or so. I don't think we've seen since about 2014, 2013, anything quite like this in terms of its impact on the search results. So according to Google, the HCU integration into the core algorithm was meant to better match user intent with the content that it's promoting, that Google is promoting. So basically, better intent and content matching has been the name of the game for this update. Intent and content, meaning your intentions, your desires, your objectives for even putting in the keywords will be largely met in a satisfactory manner by Google with this update, or at least that's the theory. Meaning, with this update, users are more likely to find content online, specifically on Google, that will be helpful and that will clash directly with their intentions for searching. Meaning, greater user satisfaction is the end goal of Google with this update. According to Google, initially they were expecting 40% of the search results to be, to be free of unhelpful content, but now they're saying that about 45% was the more realistic number. So there's still a lot of unhelpful content out there. Like if you search a question and posts from Reddit come out and it's a lot of garbage from other posters out there that can be found on that page, I wouldn't consider that too helpful. And there's still a lot of that on Google's search results. But Google says almost half of it is gone. And this number will, continue to increase and refine the search results, at least in theory, as the months go on. And then lastly, some people who've been following, the movement of the search results, as I mentioned, the likes of SEMrush, Ahrefs, Kissmetrics, all those entities that monitor SERP volatility, along with people who, specialize in observing and analyzing Google updates, the likes of Glenn Gabe, people over at Search Engine Land, Moz. A lot of them have mentioned that when it comes to actual rankings, not much changes, happened at the top of the SERPs, meaning positions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 didn't change much with this update, but a lot of the changes seem to have occurred at the lower half of the first page of Google, meaning position 6, 7, 8. If there's a 9 or 10, that's rarely ever the case these days, but if there's a 9 or 10, that's when, that's where a lot of the movement happened. So that's kind of it in terms of what happened with the Google March 2024 core update. Now, we want to make sure to distinguish it from the HCU. How does it differ? Since these are both updates that are supposed to promote, helpful content and at the same time demote unhelpful content from the search results. There's not much difference except the March 2024 update is more massive in terms of impact, meaning a lot more websites were affected. And helpful content was still the theme of this update, except that, as I mentioned in the previous slide, the core update now integrates the HCU in itself, meaning it's really embedded in Google. And if you're not able to produce content that falls within the criteria of what Google defines as helpful, it only means you're going to have a really, really hard time ranking moving forward. Okay, we've alluded to the impact of the March 2024 core update in earlier slides, but I just wanted to give you kind of a breakdown, I guess, or, a few highlights from what I've seen all over the web. So basically, if you were hit by the March 2024 update, you could expect that your traffic decline in terms of organic traffic, of course, the one that comes from search engines, in particular from Google. You could expect about an 80% traffic decline if you get hit pretty hard. There are more extreme cases where in pre-November helpful content update, they were doing just fine, and then they get hit with the HCU in November and they're down 80%. And after they've exerted some effort in, trying to rehabilitate their content, trying to get it to conform more to what Google considers useful, instead of getting better, they get worse with the March 2024 update. Some cases have been documented wherein a website has lost 97% of its organic traffic. In some cases, it doesn't even appear that the website deserves it because, the content seems fine by most accounts, but hey, it's Google. We don't know what the intention was, if this website was guilty of other things that might violate Google's terms, or or things that Google might find not suitable for being promoted on top of its search results. But the fact of the matter is, these things have happened, and in some cases, it's a compounding negative effect between updates. I mean, if you're down 97% in organic, you might as well blow up the website and start anew. But some websites are still hopeful that they might recover from this. More on that later. On the flip side, there are websites that have reported that they've enjoyed more than a 50% gain in terms of organic traffic. So more power to them. A lot of these websites are the ones who describe themselves and their work as being honest, white hat, very pro-user all of these years, and they've been claiming that Google's been ignoring the hard work that they put in, and magically after the HCU update and then the March 2024 update, they're finally getting their just due, and they're basically reaping the rewards after years of being ignored by Google. And finally, as I mentioned in the past slide, most of the volatility in the search results seem to be happening at the lower half of the first page rather than the top half. There have been cases where people would tweet or post on Reddit or on forums that there was a major shakeup at the top of the search results for their target keywords, but those are few and far between. Most of the people getting, boosts or demotions are dwelling on the lower half of the search results page, or the first page at least of Google search results. So yeah, that's kind of the real world impact so far. There are many winners and losers, but generally the theme has been there has been little to no relief for people who were hit hard by the HCU of November, and people who've been working hard on their content, making it more attractive and engaging for users. Those seem to be the kinds of websites that have been the winners from this update. The thing is, this update has been nothing short of controversial. and rightfully so, because it's been the most impactful of the past 10 years, number one. And number two, there's this general sentiment that a lot of undeserving websites got hit really hard, while a lot of websites that don't exactly deserve to win in this update are now up there and enjoying the traffic benefits. And I'm sure this has not escaped Google's attention. As a matter of fact, Google is currently encouraging webmasters to send in their feedback on the last update, which is, to me, kind of a soft admission that some things about this update did not go as planned. I think in one of my sessions in the SEO trainings that I did recently, where I had Jason Asidre, talking about backlinks and all, he mentioned something that this last update, relied heavily on machine learning and whatnot, and some of the inner workings and the ways that this update rolled out was not exactly supervised and controlled by human Google engineers, but more on the AI side or the machine learning side of Google's core algorithms, which probably explains why the update took, as long as it did to roll out, and why there has been a general sentiment that some things about this update were not exactly fair. So that's that. If you were negatively impacted and you felt it was wrong, you could always submit this, your feedback to Google, and maybe if enough people send in, feedback and evidence of things not going well and things not being quite right, Google might send out an update to remedy those things, in the near future. But I highly doubt it. There might be a few tweaks here and there, but I think the March 2024 update is here to stay for the most part. So let's call out the elephant in the room. A lot of people have been postulating online that the March 2024 update is targeting AI-generated content. So is it or is it not? If you ask me, and nobody has, the 100% definitive answer on this one, but based on my experience, my observation, and my knowledge of machine learning and how it affects content, I highly doubt that this update is targeted towards AI content. And in the bullets here, I list the reasons why I think, that is the case. Number one, AI content certainly has the potential to be unhelpful. I mean, if you type a simple prompt there, like write me an article about the best organic dog food for my Shih Tzu, the generative AI platforms like Bing or like ChatGPT would be able to write a somewhat decent article about it. It's not going to be at the caliber of something written by an expert in dog nutrition, but it's going to be, a so-so article that comes out. But here's the thing. Whether you think that's helpful or not is not really, the focus of the point here. The point is, whatever comes out of generative AI when it comes to content is usually a direct result of your skills in terms of putting in information to the AI platform, number one. And number two, it's also a function of your ability to deliver very specific, very clear prompts in order for the AI to really know what you want it to write. So if you were good at prompt engineering and you put in enough key information like names, figures, statistics, insights into the AI platform, it could probably write an article that's as good or nearly as good as something that's written by a true human dog nutrition expert. So what I'm saying here basically is, whether you're using generative AI or not, generative AI is only as good as the information and the prompts that you give it. So generative AI is indeed very capable of producing unhelpful content, and that can get you in trouble with this update. But at the same time, generative AI, when used by someone who knows what he's doing, is highly capable of really producing 5-star content that is unlikely to get hit by an update like this. In short, in Tagalog, nasa gumagamit yan. If you know what you're doing and the content that comes out is good, you don't have to worry about updates like this. While if you don't really know what you're doing and you don't have much of an editorial guideline handbook or any editorial standards for that matter, then what comes out is going to be shallow garbage, and that's going to get you hit. It's not the AI, it's how you use the AI in order to generate the content. So as far as I'm concerned, it's not really AI being targeted. It's really, bad content, whether it's been written by AI or people. I mean, I've been in the SEO industry long enough to know that even before ChatGPT came along, we've been producing a lot of garbage content by hiring writers who are not really good at writing to begin with, or by hiring writers who might be good at writing but that are not exactly experts in a certain topic, or they're not really, putting in the kind of research necessary to produce really good content. That kind of stuff, even if it was human produced, that could get hit by this one. So whether it's AI or human produced, if it's low quality, non-engaging, non-helpful content, it's probably going to get hit. So it's not really AI. It's the kind of content you're producing. So if you've been hit, what do you do next? The short answer is that you're screwed, at least for the short term. I don't think there's any way to quickly bounce back from this kind of update, especially if you're down 80%, 90% in terms of your organic traffic. That's not coming back anytime soon. But there are a few things you can try. So hopefully when, Google sends out some corrective updates or it refreshes the update on March 2024 to reassess the helpfulness of content across the web, you might end up seeing some recovery, or in some cases, full recovery. But I will warn you that there is no magic bullet here. There is going to be a lot of work to do, a lot of introspection, a lot of, self-checking on your part, a lot of backtracking on the content that you already have on your website, and a lot of review on whether this is helpful or not, this is deserving of ranking or not in the current day and age. There's going to be a lot of that. And of course, if you feel and you made an honest assessment to yourself that the content on your website isn't exactly up to par, there will be even more work by way of editing that content or, overhauling it all the way. So there's going to be a lot of work, but I'm going to give you the best advice possible, because I'll be honest, none of our websites were hit by this particular update. And I think that's to be expected. I've always believed in investing a lot in writers and editors, and most of our content is human generated and it's written for a very specific audience in mind. But I know that not everyone has those kinds of lofty editorial standards. So people have gotten hit. So even if none of my clients or our personal websites have gotten hit by this one, I've been approached by people who have been on the wrong end of this update. And I'm going to give you the same advice that I gave them in trying to recover from this update. Anyway, here are some strategies that you can adapt to try and deal with the latest update if you were, harmed by it in terms of your organic search. The first thing you can do is to, sit down and do nothing. And before you start thinking that I'm tripping here and I'm messing with you, listen to this. There have been numerous times over Google's history wherein it says something is bad, it penalizes it, and then later on, the penalty seems to wane, people forget about it, and before you know it, it starts working again. It's happened with things like forum and comment spam, wherein people abused it. Google says enough of that, rolls out the penalty, people stop doing it, and then a few years later, you notice that some undeserving websites start ranking for it again. You see it with a lot of other things like content farms, which have basically evolved from low-level content farms with chop suey style content, being demoted by Google, and then people stop doing it for a while. After a while, Google seems to, lose track of what it penalized before, and before you know it, you've got an entire ecosystem of modified content farms again ranking. So in SEO, at least as far as Google is concerned, over the past 25 years or so, things can vacillate from good to bad and bad to good. And in the context of the March 2024 update, you may be a loser now and you might get some traffic and ranking demotions, but who's to say that in the future, near or far, Google might change its mind, roll out some new updates, and then before you know it, you've recovered. Now, is this a likely thing to happen? Probably not. It's probably a less than 1% chance that this thing is going to happen to you and you're going to recover by doing nothing. But it has happened in the past, and other strange things have happened in the past. So if you think your website is undeserving of being demoted in the last update, and if you believe you uphold high editorial standards, if you believe that your content is written not for search engines but for a legitimate audience, and you believe that your content is factual, it's useful, it's engaging, all that good stuff, then don't do anything for now. Don't panic and wait 3 to 6 months, and maybe, just maybe, Google might roll out another update to try and mitigate the unintended effects of this update. Again, there's a very small chance of this happening, but for websites that were really not deserving of being hit hard by it, there's a reason why Google has promoted the feedback form. If enough people complain about it and Google recognizes that there is an error in the way that this update unfolded, then it might do something corrective in the future. But if you want to be proactive when it comes to improving your website's chances of recovering from the HCU and the March update, another thing you can look at would be to make sure that you improve the helpfulness of your content. Helpfulness can mean a lot of things. Helpful is kind of subjective as a word. What is helpful to you may not be helpful to me, and we could both be wrong in the eyes of Google because it might be defining helpfulness in a very different way. But in general, the way that the SEO community understands helpfulness in the context of this update is that helpfulness is a quality of content wherein it has the ability to meet the expectations and the needs of the searcher. If the searcher needs something, whether it's informational, transactional, or navigational, and your content in the web page has the ability to respond to it head-on, then it's probably useful. Okay, so how specifically do you improve helpfulness? The first thing you want to do is to satisfy the implied intent behind keywords. Meaning, your web page has to have the kind of content that responds to the keywords and the intentions behind them that is entered by users. So, what's an example of this? If a user is looking for rabies symptoms, then your website should produce content that is full of information, useful information, and factual information about the symptoms of rabies. Now, is it enough that in a long-form article wherein you write 1,500 words and you list down the symptoms of rabies, it's going to be considered helpful? Not necessarily, But if you write it in such a way that the symptoms of rabies are front and center, they command attention, and they're easy to read, and they are factual, and they are true, and they are written in a very direct, snappy, and engaging way, then there's a good chance that Google will recognize your content as being helpful to someone who is looking for a list of symptoms of the disease rabies. Next, you want to make sure that you make direct answers stand out. So how do you make direct answers to questions stand out? So for example, a question from a user would be something like, how do I know that my diet program is working? If you want to rank for that particular question, you should have, a web page that has a title tag that corresponds to that keyword. Maybe not word for word, but the context have to match up. And then in the body of your content, there has to be a section that answers that question very directly. How do you make it stand out? You can have a separate subsection for it. You can have the kernel of that answer, meaning the core of that answer, in bold letters. You can even highlight it. There are a lot of things that you can do in order to, to make the content stand out. But basically, if you have it above the fold, if it's formatted the right way using headings or subheadings, and you highlight very specific and very succinct points that answer that question, then there's a good chance that Google will consider your content more helpful than other content pieces that are similar to it. Next, you want to avoid too much fluff content. Fluff content is basically words that are being written for the sake of padding up the word count. As you may know, if you've been in the SEO industry for a while now, there is a belief in the SEO industry that longer word counts help rankings. And to a certain degree, there's a truth in that. But only if you write content that is actually full of information, full of entity mentions, meaning this content is not just a waste of space there, but it actually says something. It's actually there to inform, or it's there to make arguments and points. If that's the kind of content you're writing, then you probably have nothing to worry about. But if your writers or your AI are just writing words for the sake of writing words, and they're going around in circles without supplying any new information to a particular topic, or without making any valid arguments, then Google and its machine learning systems and people in general will get tired of your content. It's like, the essays you wrote back when you were in grade school, with the theory or the assumption that if you just make your essay long enough, then it's going to mentally condition your teacher to give you a higher mark, because it gives the impression that you know more about the topic than you actually do. But if your teacher was smart and she reads through that, and then she determines that out of this 1,000 words, only 100 of it is actually informative, and the rest is just you beating around the bush, going around in circles, and saying absolutely nothing using hundreds of words, then your teacher should probably penalize you for it. The same goes for search engines. If Google is able to understand, using its AI, machine learning, and other algorithmic functions, that your content isn't really worth that much by way of information, and it's a lot longer than it needs to be, then it might not consider your content very useful. But if your content is 1,000 words, and it's 1,000 words worth of solid argumentation, facts, cross-checking, cross-validation, stuff like that, entity mentions, statistics, then it's probably going to be considered non-fluff content. It's going to be considered as a piece of content that adds to the overall state of knowledge in a given topic, and it's going to be considered as something that generally contributes positively to the overall discourse of a topic on the internet. You want to make sure that you're not just talking, you're actually contributing something of substance to the discussion. If your content can do that, then it's probably not fluff, and it stands a good chance of being considered helpful by Google. Next, you want to make sure that you deliver on the promises that your title tags imply. So when a user enters a query on Google or other search engines, they are given the traditional search results, which is basically the title tag, which is the blue clickable text, and then the text under it, which is non-clickable, but it gives a preview of what the user can expect on the page. That's your meta description. The title tag is super important because it's the most eye-catching part of a search result. Now, your title tag is bound to have keywords. That's SEO 101. You want to mention your main keywords in order to rank for a particular query or a particular keyword. Now, if you mention your main keywords in your title tag, you are making an implicit promise to the reader that they can expect to read about what the title tag is talking about at length and in greater detail if they click on it and go to the web page. So, if you mention a keyword on the title tag, you better make sure that the content in the web page actually reflects that keyword in the title tag and it delivers on the promise of the title tag. If in the title tag you talk about 2024's best dashcams, the content of the content which bears that title tag and the page that title tag leads to, it has to talk about the 10 best dashcams of 2024. I know it's common sense. Like most of us really do talk about the topics that we mention in the keywords in the title tags, but there are some weird editorial practices in other websites wherein people try to mislead users and try to make them run a gauntlet of other web pages before they get to the actual point of the content. And that's something that Google is trying to proactively avoid and demote. So yeah, don't beat around the bush. Make sure that your title tags and the keywords they mention are reflected as being central to the context of the web page that you are asking users to click on. Next, you want to improve originality. I think this is one of the most important parts of this update because, in this day and age, a lot of content, whether it's in video form on YouTube, whether it's in text form in news or blog websites, a lot of the content that we see are aggregated. What does aggregated mean? It means it's from another source and then it's just being parroted all over the internet by other sources. Meaning you are not the original source of the information. You are just trying to hop on the topic's bandwagon, hoping to rank for the content, for the keyword that the topic is represented by, and then you're hoping to capitalize on that traffic. Basically, if the entire internet right now is talking about Anthony Edwards of the Minnesota Timberwolves, and you don't have any original stats, storylines, and whatnot on Anthony Edwards, and you are just rephrasing news items or, commenting back on the commentary of other talking heads on the internet, then your content isn't exactly that original, and you can make the case that it's, basically aggregated content. It's from another source which started the topic, which added to the discourse, and your website basically is just piling on it. Now, the HCU plus the March 2024 update are not exactly anti-aggregate content, but they are very much pro-originality content, meaning they are trying to give greater priority for websites that carry original content to rank higher than websites that are carrying non-original or aggregated content. So, what kind of content do you need to produce in order to project originality in the eyes of Google? Number one, you can use your first-hand knowledge when you're producing content. Like, for example, if you're a travel blogger, don't just write about the things that you can see, say, in the province of Bohol, which have been talked about endlessly in the internet. If you wanted something more original, you can use your own perspective from visiting that particular place. And if you've been there, your experience will probably be unique versus everyone else's. And that's what Google and, and people want to see. They want to see firsthand information based on your own experiences, based on your own opinions of a place, based on your own impressions, in order to contribute to the overall discourse of that topic. So a lot of people have visited Bohol, a lot of people have written about Bohol, but now you're doing it and you're going to write about it using your own schema, your own perspective, and your own views on the subject matter. Next, you want to make sure that you're also writing using your expert opinion. If you are an expert on any particular topic, then you want to make sure that you put to use the expertise that you have. For example, if I've been doing SEO for almost 2 decades now, then based on that kind of experience and that kind of knowledge that I've accumulated over the past, 2 decades, you can consider me something of an expert on the topic, and that expertise should show in how informative the content, and it should show in the credentials that I'm able to present in my author bio. So your expert opinion can also be, valuable and considered original. An example of this would be this video or this blog post, whichever you're consuming right now. There was a major happening between March and April on Google, and me, being a long-time SEO guy, I am giving my quote-unquote expert opinion on this occurrence, on this phenomenon, on this update on Google, because compared to most of the population, I probably have, more of a say on the topic than your average person who's been familiar with SEO for a couple of years. Next, you can also publish your own studies, especially if these are scholarly studies. By all means, publish it on your website and it will be considered original content. It will even be considered by many people as, as a go-to resource, because if it's been done in a formal, peer-reviewed environment, then it's probably very valuable information that everyone in your industry can benefit from. Even if it isn't a formal study, if you've conducted analysis, surveys, and whatnot, you can publish them on your website and they will be considered original content. Next, you can also offer fresh takes on existing data. Like, for example, if the National Economic Development Authority of the Philippines, NEDA, publishes statistics on economic information, on GDP growth and whatnot, you can still create original content out of this. If you are any good at statistics, data science, and economics, you can analyze the data that is made public by a government agency and draw insights from it and publish the insights. That's considered, original content. And it's basically a fresh take on existing data. You can also publish original media assets. Like, for example, if you are a travel blogger from the Philippines and you've been to the Great Barrier Reef in Australia and you took your own original pictures, I'm sure that's going to be considered original and valuable, not just by your readers or users. It will be the same thing when it comes to Google's algorithms. So the originality of your content is going to be paramount if you want to be a website that recovers from basically getting a pile driver from Google after getting hit by the HCU or the March update. The next thing you want to do is improve EEAT. EEAT is basically expertise, experience, authority, and trust. Basically, it was originally EAT, expertise, authority, and trust. Those are the things that Google is, seeking to see in websites to determine whether they're deserving of ranking or not, whether they're high quality content pieces or not. Later on, it added experience because when generative AI became mainstream, content production basically skyrocketed across the internet. But Google is looking for the kind of content that is written based on the experience of humans and not just the data that sits in the servers of these generative platforms. So what you want to do is make sure that your website exudes these qualities. So how do you showcase your experience? In your writings, especially if you're a blogger, as I mentioned in an earlier slide, you can talk about it in a way that you are making your arguments, you are making your cases, you are presenting facts based on your empirical information about it. Basically, if you've experienced it as a professional or as a person who's been to a certain place or a person who's spoken to a certain person of interest, you can make sure to include that and to explicitly mention that in your writing. So experience is going to play a huge role. You can also establish expertise. How do you do this? One good way is in your author bio, just like in this screenshot, you can see here that I talk about myself. I mean, that's something I don't like doing that much, but here I kind of have to do it in order to bring the point across to Google and to the readers of my blog that I am someone who is worthy of being listened to or whose work is being is worthy of being read by other people because I know what I'm talking about. How do I make sure that people know what I'm talking about? Basically, is you have to, write about your credentials. So in here, I mentioned my experience as a coder, as a student of data science, my experience in it, so on and so forth. So an author bio is a good way to, promote that. You can also have your LinkedIn account state your expertise in a particular topic. If you've been working, say, 20 years in a particular industry, you probably have a lot of certifications, citations, maybe some written work about it. Those are all things that point to you being an expert on a certain topic. And Google, for its part, is gearing towards promoting content that is written by experts and communicated to their specific audiences. Next, you want to make sure that you build authoritativeness. The classic Google signal for authority or authoritativeness is backlinks. So the greater the number of backlinks to your website, especially if they're coming from other legitimate websites, that's going to boost your authority, not just as a brand, not just as a website, but also as an author. You will also want to be mentioned in the works of others. If you are being mentioned in mainstream media publications like news sites, or if your work is being cited in other blogs, or if it's being mentioned in videos, Google is probably going to become aware of that. And the more referrals, the more backlinks, the more citations you get, the greater your authoritativeness becomes in the eyes of Google and even in the eyes of human readers. Next, you want to make sure that you cultivate trustworthiness. That includes using your own real persona, not relying on fake identities. Make sure that people know you exist in the real world. One thing you can do about that is to have a clear contact us form, and then you can mention that the physical address of your workplace if that information is, something that you can make public. So using HTTPS is also a great sign of trustworthiness, being included in the Better Business Bureau's or BBB's list of, good companies. That's another thing. Being reviewed positively online, on LinkedIn, on Glassdoor jobs, other, places could be taken as a trustworthiness signal. So there's a lot of things you can do here. And generally, if the sentiment of the public is neutral to good and it reflects on, on web content all over the internet, then that's going to be a good thing as far as your trustworthiness is concerned. Next, you want to have high editorial standards, meaning there will be a team that actually QAs the work that gets published on your website. So the basics of it would be things like formatting, grammar, fact checking. Those are the things that you'll want to get correctly at a minimum if you want to promote high editorial standards. A higher level of this would be to hire editors that actually refine the content, train your writers to become better producers of content, and basically promote a very distinct and engaging style on your website. So if your editors are able to set the direction of the content on your website, not only the information on the website, but the actual identity of the content, the personality of the content, the direction of the content, those are going to contribute to you being perceived as a website that has high editorial standards. And if you have high editorial standards, there's no reason why people would not want to read your work, and there's no reason why they won't want to promote and share your work. And search engines like Google are going to be very perceptive to that kind of action on the internet. Lastly, there's content presentation. You can make sure that your content is easier to read, more skimmable. Generally, it offers a better user experience to your readers in order to be considered helpful by Google. So what can you do in order to promote this? The first one would be to consider having a TLDR section. If you don't know what TLDR means, it's basically too long, didn't read. If you have long form content, for example, if you write a blog post that's like 2,000, 3,000 words long, you can imagine that not everyone will have the time to go through every word of that content. So one thing that some bloggers do or other websites do would be to have a TLDR section at the very top of the web page, wherein all the major points are listed in bullet points. That way, you won't have to require people to read through the entire thing. So TLDR can be super important because it provides direct answers which may satisfy the intentions of your users. Next, you can also have a table of contents similar to this. This is from Jason Asidre's Great.ph. They're pretty good at using tables of contents. Basically, if it's long-form content, for example, if it's a guide on getting your SSS ID or getting a business permit in the Philippines, you can imagine that there's going to be a lot of content with a lot of sections on this one. And if it's someone who just needs a particular piece of information to guide him on a specific step of the process, like for example, getting the barangay clearance, if that's the only information they need, they don't have to read through 3,000 to 5,000 words or the entire guide. They just want that specific bit of information to get them through the process. And the way that your website can become useful in this regard would be to have a table of contents. That way, your readers can just skim on the topics within that, comprise the bigger whole of your article, and then click on a jump link, be taken directly to the section about getting a barangay clearance for you and your business, and then the user can just read up on that, and that's that. They got what they came for, and they're out. You didn't have to put them through, a lot of content in order to find the specific information that they are looking for. Basically, if it was Philippine TV, you did not have to make them watch 9 commercials in order to get 1 minute of entertainment. If you can just give them what they came for in the first place, then your content would be considered much more useful than another website which does otherwise. Next, you can use headings and subheadings. So for example, usually a page's main headline would be coded in H1. Subheadlines or subsections can be headlined by H2 text. sub-levels of those sections can be coded in H3 text as sub-headlines and so on and so forth. This just makes your content more skimmable. Again, people looking for very specific information out of long-form content will be better able to find exactly what they're looking for in a shorter amount of time than if you just wrote an entire wall of text without sub-headlines, which not only is unhelpful, but it looks ugly too. Next, shorter paragraphs is usually better when it comes to your writing style. Like paragraphs that are maximum of 3 sentences is considered ideal. If you can shorten it to 1 or 2 sentences, that's even better. The reason that this is recommended in your content presentation is that you are able to better flesh out and separate thoughts from other thoughts. Meaning, it doesn't have to be one big jumbled mess of text, which makes it more difficult for people to find specific information that they're after. If you break things up into shorter paragraphs, it will be easier for people to skim, read shallowly until they get to the part where they say, this is exactly what I'm looking for. This is the only part I need to read. And then basically their needs are met. Lastly, you will want to use bullet points on the internet. I mean, this is not exactly new, but if you're presenting lists, whether they're unordered or ordered, it becomes much easier to read if there's, text that stands out accompanied by bullet points, because it allows people to focus on what the main point is of a particular set of text that's been bulleted, as opposed to paragraph form wherein people will be required to read more. So basically, our battle cry here is to help users find exactly what they need in as short a time as possible. And bullet points, numbers, and other, implements that help you move closer towards that state, those things all help in promoting better user experience and overall helpfulness of content. So that's it for our presentation on the March 2024 update. I hope you guys picked up something today. I hope if you were negatively impacted, some of these tips end up helping you. And yeah, if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them if you raise them in the comment section. Peace.